Hey guys, what's up? It's me, Thomas. Today we're back here with Gaijin Goomba. I know, been a while, but hey, figure why not. Today we got That Time Ramen was illegal in Japan. Yeah, that's new. I'm actually kind of curious to see what happened and what made it illegal, so how about we hop in and find out for ourselves. Be sure to like, subscribe for more. Hope you enjoy. Here we go.
Hey dude, I know it's exceptionally late, but Happy New Year! You ready for the first video of 2025?
Yeah, man, I just gotta...
It's here.
What's here?
What do you mean it's here? Ah, jeez, what do you give me this time? Man, you really
Got
gotta
me.
let me know when he does stuff like this. I mean, just...
Oh, chair.
Oh, another one?
I'm lost. I already have a C7 ergonomic chair. What's this all about?
Well, the Flexespot people got a hold of me last month and wanted to know if we wanted them to sponsor a few more of our videos this year. And considering how much you've been loving that C7 chair, I figured you'd be down for their new C7 Max.
I mean,
C7
it
Max?
sure is a heck of a lot easier to put together than the other one was, so... Alright, let's give her a spin. Ooh, okay, that's something that absolutely rocks. See, while the regular C7 had a lot of space that you could sit cross-legged in, the C7 Max has even more cushioning crafted at the thigh contour, made up of latex cushion. As someone who always gets sore thighs from sitting and editing way too long, this
that
actually
does sound about right.
alleviates a lot of the pain and discomfort I have in my thighs and legs. Having all that space to sit cross-legged is one thing, but this just straight up alleviates pain. Alright, we got the standard height adjuster, always a good thing to have, and then there's that 135-degree lean back, which always feels super nice. But the C7 Max takes it one step further because now I got a freaking footrest I can put my legs up onto and really lean back and relax. And I cannot tell you all how good this feels.
Nice.
Like I could sleep in this thing.
Oh, flip the switch next to that one.
Okay, okay,
wow,
I
you
see.
cool.
This appears to be an anti-shrimp and pro-recline capability. I mean, I'm here for it. When I'm working, I want to be sitting up straight, but if I want to recline and relax at my computer, sliding that seat forward actually feels really good.
Seat depth.
And I'm
Nice.
freaking losing my mind with these armrests. Because not only do they have one
360,
point of
wow.
360-degree adjustable movement with these pads, but there is another section that has 270 degrees pivot, so you could do whatever you want with these armrests. You want to push them out so you don't have them anymore, you want to tuck them in to have more surface area, you can literally do whatever you want with this thing. Oh, not to mention that these can be raised and lowered as well, so if you want to rest your arms up high or low, you got the capability. Finally, I love what they added to the Max with the back and headrest. The regular C7 had a couple of adjustable areas, but you're kind of limited on what you could do. But the freaking Max adjusts to everything and everywhere. You could rotate, tilt, pivot, and lift as opposed to just lifting. And you can even raise up the back of this entire chair if you want to, for those of us that have long torsos and whatnot. Honestly,
Makes
while
sense.
the C7 has a solid general flexibility for long periods of sitting, the
Sync.
C7 Max just has a ton more that you can adjust. Like, with how maneuverable this thing is, this chair can freaking compensate to any body type. Tall,
Nice.
short, wide, it accommodates everything, and I could not be happier. So if you
Dude.
want to grab one for yourself, check out my link in the description and use the code C750 to get $50 off your order. Comes with a 30-day return policy and a 10-year warranty for damaged parts.
So, y'all snug?
Yeah, man, I didn't think I could be even more cozy while editing.
Who knew?
Cool. So, what did the patrons vote on for this month?
Oh, this would be good.
Illegal ramen.
Wait, what?
Yeah, we're not
This is
clickbaiting
good.
you here. This was a thing that actually happened in Japan, and it's kind of deliciously ironic, isn't it?
Really?
At this point in time, I really do think that ramen is the most synonymous food with Japan. I mean, it's
True. I mean,
revered in almost
anime
every
everywhere,
anime,
think about
game, and movie it's ever been in, and it's been in a lot of them. To
True.
coming to a point where it's transcended global recognition from its original birthplace of China to Japan, becoming a Japanese food. Yet, for at least 5 years period of time, this stuff was illegal in the country. So, how,
once I got
you
it
might
here.
be wondering, how on earth could such a recognized icon of Japan, introduced to us from the country's countless games and shows that transcended it into a globally recognized cultural icon, fall into the status of noodly prohibition? Well, to answer that, crack open your
All right, here we
textbooks,
go.
folks, because we gotta
Where
turn
we
the
off
clock
to?
back all the way to 1910, with the first ramen shop opening in Tokyo.
1910,
Now,
huh?
Chinese immigrants brought over noodle-making techniques as far back as the 1600s, but ramen, or ramen as it was originally called, didn't start seeing a lot of attention or gaining a lot of attraction until this period of time. This is when a lot of Japanese culinary chefs began weaving their own homegrown flavors and tastes into the noodle tapestry that they were given, and people started to take notice. Because contrary to modern times, ramen wasn't the be-all end-all Japanese staple we know today back during the Taisho era. While Japan eats more bread than rice in this day and age, I'd argue the opposite was true 85 years ago. That isn't to say that ramen, soba, udon, and so forth weren't enjoyed or even popular in certain places, but this was during a time that Japan still relied on the greatest of Gokoku Hojo grains, rice. With wheat, soy, and milk.
Yeah, they were a rice kingdom. That's basically how they were able to unite the country at first before the Sengoku Jidai. Trust me, if you look up history of Japan, you'll understand. Rice was basically a part of their history, and, well, like alcohol is for us back when we first settled the colonies. I'm not kidding. Like I said, there is a lot to this story. Just look it up if you don't believe me. Anywho.
Millet's not really sharing the same culinary limelight, so to speak. But that all changed in 1945. See, while we in the West are typically only taught about Japan from Pearl Harbor to the island hopping to the country's surrender at the USS Missouri, there was a great deal that Japan was going through after September 2nd that we're never told about.
Japanese in the big cities like Tokyo and Yokohama are faced with acute shortages of food and goods of every description. Crowds gather at department stores, eager to purchase the few meager supplies available, and Yank MPs have their hands full coping with the distracted people.
Sustained firebombing of the country over the last year left over 2 million buildings in ruin and even greater numbers of people fighting the brink of constant starvation, capitalizing on and consuming whatever they could find. And to make matters worse, 3 months later, Japan would chronicle its second worst rice harvest in over 40 years. And from what I could tell, other Asian countries ravaged by World War II, like Taiwan and China, weren't faring well with their harvests of rice either.
It's usually hard to go from a wartime economy to a peace
in other parts of Asia. Japan just didn't have the resources to feed its own population. According to what I've researched, food production dropped in the country by 26% as people were forced to get their protein from insects and other nutrients from consuming entire plants like sweet potatoes. With the country in throes of post-war reconstruction, severely lacking harvests, and now occupied by the United States, millions of folks were going to starve if something wasn't done. But thankfully something was. As part of an effort to rebuild Japan and to mirror its own values and keeping communism from spreading into Japan like it did in China, the United States began importing insane amounts of wheat to keep Japan's millions fed. And from what I could gather, from 1948 to 1951, right up to the end of the US's occupational time span, Japan's consumption of bread blasted from less than 300,000 tons to over 600,000 tons, doubling in that time span. Now, it sounds like an easy and simple fix, right? I mean, as previously mentioned, it's not like Japan was a stranger to wheat. It was a part of the 5 great grains. But with trying to feed that many people in post-war reconstruction comes logistical issues. And again, based on my research, government and overseas food distribution programs were constantly behind schedule, with some people not receiving food for over 2 weeks. So, what did people do to survive? Well, let me introduce you to the Japanese black market food vendors.
Black markets thrive. The yen, worth about 6.5 cents ordinarily, buys only about 3 cents worth at black market prices. Fish and dried seaweed are part of the diet.
Now, black market vendors have been around in Japan for a long time before the war was over. With the entire country under militant control during World War II, food for the everyday individual was rationed, as a lot of food was needed to properly support troops at home and abroad, especially abroad. But even as the US occupied Japan from 1942 to 1951, that system of rationing stayed in place.
Even the standard diet, rice, is strictly rationed. Every grain is precious and must be salvaged.
The U.S. occupational forces expanded the wartime ban on outdoor food vending in conjunction with the local government to control rationing, as obviously it was hard to get
vended outside parts.
But with millions jobless, homeless, foodless, and food arriving weeks late at a time, black markets like Ameyokocho in Tokyo became critical for the everyman in Japan to survive. But now you might be wondering, out of all of the potential foods that could be purchased at these black markets, why did ramen come out on top? Well, I'm doing a lot of speculating here, so take what I say with a grain of salt. But I think it was due to a perfect storm of traditional taste and what was available at the time. Like I said, rice stock was at an all-time low, so while your atypical onigiri or sushi may have been a perfect solution to the hunger problem, there just wasn't enough rice to make that happen. However, there was something that Japan now had access to in absolute abundance: wheat. All that wheat brought in by the United States. And not only did this make ramen extremely accessible to make, it was also extremely cheap. Two things that the populace desperately needed for their day-to-day food. And how did these black market stalls get all this wheat and flour?
Steal it?
Well, apparently 90% of these black market yatai stalls were owned by the Yakuza, who were quick to extort their cut of profits.
Yeah, that does sound
it
about
was
right.
the Yakuza insiders that were able to sneak away the metric tons of flour needed from various Japanese milling companies and organizations. But why ramen of all things? Why not another wheat-based food like all that bread that I was talking about before that the people were eating?
Oh yeah, nowadays.
Well, again, I'm making assumptions, but with ramen having grown in popularity in the country for the last 30 years, as opposed to the rationed bread given to the people, I think ramen may have been both easier to make for everyday people, as well as being more palatable for everyday people.
And customizable.
But there's one other reason why ramen may be the food that really took off during this time.
Figure out what you want to put in
Its
there.
perception as being a superfood. U.S. occupants would constantly postulate wheat and animal meat as being the nutritional superior food compared to the more vegetarian food of traditional Japan. And whether or not that claim holds any scientific weight, that was a sentiment that was growing with folks in Japan during the time. While post-war ramen was pretty basic, being a soy sauce mixed base with a couple of different locally accessed animal proteins for stock, with some pork and maybe some other toppings, based on what I researched, foods like this that were rich in proteins and fats became colloquially known as stamina foods, giving people a really good get-up-and-go power. And I don't know about you all, I mean, after eating a big old bowl of carbs like that, the only thing I feel like doing is food coma-ing in my chair or bed. But for folks starving while trying to physically rebuild their homes, I could absolutely believe it.
True.
I'd imagine they'd be burning through carbs like nobody's business, so they'd probably feel great after eating a bowl of this stuff. But despite all of these positives, ramen in most of its forms was technically still illegal. While it was a solid fix to a massive underlying problem, people still suffered legal consequences for breaking rationing, despite how off schedule it was. At best, police would merely confiscate goods such as the aforementioned flour off of vendors and transporters, and at worst, I'd imagine more than a few people saw jail time.
Yeah,
But hey, I
I
don't
can see that.
freaking blame them. If I saw a 26% dip in food production in my country with only 1,000 calories accessible per day, I'd be right there in line with them. Thankfully, in time, rationing became less and less strict, and by the mid-1950s, wheat and flour were far easier to access, and ramen only became more and more popular. And with its rise came something really interesting.
Yeah, there's.
Entrepreneurship. See a need, fill a need, as a wise robot
Fill a
once
need,
said.
fill a need.
And with the food crisis hitting critical levels, and despite Yakuza intervention, there were a lot of small businesses that for the first time were able to really thrive. It's not much a concession considering the rampant starvation of the country, but as an entrepreneur myself and knowing how rough it is for small businesses to get far in Japan, especially these days, I can't help but look back at the goings-on of the black market yatai stalls and smile a little bit. It's really cool to see the little guy do something that the big companies and government couldn't, but maybe that's just me. Now, in
Sometimes
the
you
wake
gotta
of
have
a
those
half a
fools, you know.
decade of illegal ramen later, I can't think of another food more iconic to the identity of the country to this day. I mean, yeah, there's sushi and onigiri, but man, when it comes to international recognition of Japanese food,
Yep,
the
most
otaku
people will just say
community
ramen or
especially,
sushi.
I think ramen trumps even pocky and ramune at this point.
Damn.
It's the perfect storm of historical familiarity, easy to access ingredients, and a big need for easy high-carb food. Ramen went from being the illegal icon that saved the country to the multinational iconic food of the country. It's really crazy how that worked out, huh? But in any case,
That's
thanks for
history
watching,
for ya.
everyone. And thanks to FlexiSpy for sponsoring this video. If you're ready to graduate from uncomfortable gamer chairs to something real, hit up my
I'll think about it when I finally get some chance, but right now, there's a lot going on, and well, let me know what you guys think of ramen. You ever had it yourself? Well, anyway, let me know your favorites. Adios.